At precisely 7 p.m., Marcus Vaughn sat in his car outside his wife Vanessa's office, his resolve hardening. Tonight, he intended to end the sham of a marriage they'd been pretending to hold together. Unlike other husbands who ignored the red flags until it was too late, Marcus wasn't one to let things slide, especially when Vanessa's behavior had become impossible to ignore. For 2 months, he had watched her closely, piecing together the undeniable truth. It all started with a pair of red high heels. Vanessa, who openly despised anything uncomfortable, had never been one to wear such shoes unless absolutely necessary. In fact, the only times Marcus could recall her putting them on was during their more intimate moments, paired with white thigh-high stockings and a sultry lace lingerie set. Those nights had once been a cornerstone of their connection, but seeing those same heels now worn to work rattled him. It was completely out of character. "Since when do you wear those to the office?" he had asked her, his voice sharp with suspicion. She didn't even stop to look at him. "I have a meeting with Andrew Langston," she replied coolly. "I need to look professional." Her dismissive tone stung, and without another word, she walked out the door, leaving Marcus standing there with a pit forming in his stomach. The inconsistencies piled up. At first, it was the occasional late night at work, an hour here, maybe 2. But over the weeks, those late nights stretched longer and became more frequent, conveniently coinciding with Vanessa's growing need to dress professionally. Then there was the so-called bachelorette party she claimed to attend. Vanessa had always mocked bars, clubs, and people who indulged in drinking, calling them wastes of time. The idea of her going to 3 bachelorette parties in as many months seemed ridiculous. That night, Marcus decided he'd had enough. He followed her car from their neighborhood, taking care not to be seen. His heart sank when she pulled into the driveway of Andrew Langston's house in Glen Ellen, a place Marcus recognized from company events she had dragged him to in the past. For an hour, he waited, watching the lights inside. He didn't need any more evidence to confirm what he already knew. In a rare act of defiance, Marcus let the air out of all 4 of her tires before heading home. The next morning, Vanessa casually mentioned the flat tires while talking to their daughter Isabel. "At least no one slashed them," she said, shrugging as though it was nothing. Marcus said nothing, watching as Vanessa spun her web of lies with ease. Over the following days, Vanessa continued to string together excuses. Another late night here, a club outing with friends there. Marcus didn't bother arguing anymore. Instead, he sought out a lawyer, quietly beginning the process to end their 21-year marriage. Sitting in his car outside her office that night, Marcus reflected on their life together. They had met when Vanessa was a receptionist, struggling to climb her way into the legal field, while he had come in seeking advice about a contract. Back then, she had been charming, witty, and full of ambition. They'd dated for 2 blissful years before getting married, and for a long time, he thought their bond was unshakable. Together, they had raised their daughter, Isabel, and built a life full of memories, weekend getaways, family trips, and a shared love of simple pleasures. But that Vanessa was long gone. Everything changed when she started working for Andrew Langston. The job, which she had claimed would help with finances, became the wedge that drove them apart. Her demeanor grew colder, her time at home dwindled, and any warmth between them slowly disappeared. Marcus had tried to salvage things, suggesting date nights, and even scaling back his long hours as a truck driver. But Vanessa's interest in their marriage had clearly waned. One Friday, he had approached her, extending an olive branch. "How about dinner and a movie tonight? I finally have a Friday off, and I want to spend it with you," he said, his tone softer than usual. Her response was a slap in the face. "You know Fridays are for my girls," she said flatly, barely looking at him. "Besides, maybe if you had a normal job, one where you weren't driving across the state at all hours of the night, we'd actually have time together. But you don't. I've dealt with this for 20 years, Marcus. You can deal with it too." She left before he could respond, her words cutting deep. That night, Marcus followed her again, tracing her route to Andrew Langston's house for the second time. He didn't confront her, though the anger in his chest burned hotter with each passing moment. Instead, he avoided her all weekend, letting the realization of their failed marriage solidify. By Monday, he was sitting across from his lawyer, determined to move forward. When Marcus finally told Isabel the truth, her shock was evident. "No, that can't be true," she said, her voice trembling. "I followed her," Marcus replied grimly. "She said she was going out with friends, but she went straight to Andrew Langston's house." Isabel hesitated, her voice softening. "But what about the tires at the club?" "That was me," Marcus admitted bluntly. "I let the air out of them right there, outside his house." "She lied to you, Isabel, just like she's been lying to me." Isabel fell silent, her disbelief turning to quiet acceptance. "So, it's really over?" she asked. Marcus nodded. "It is. She broke my trust, and trust is everything. Without it, there's no love. Our marriage is finished." As they sat in the car, Isabel glanced out the window and noticed two men approaching. Upstairs, in her office, Vanessa stood beside Andrew Langston, peering down at Marcus's car with a smirk. "What a pathetic little man," she said under her breath, relieved that the gold-tinted windows obscured their view. Marcus could hardly process what he was reading. His chest tightened as his eyes scanned the restraining order's harsh allegations: spousal violence, child abuse, harassment of a minor. The words blurred, each accusation feeling like a dagger twisting in his back. "What the hell is this?" he shouted, his voice raw with disbelief. Sophia, sitting beside him, was pale as she handed him the rest of the papers. "Dad, I swear I didn't know anything about this," she stammered, tears pooling in her eyes. "This has to be a mistake." Marcus's hands trembled as he gripped the documents, his mind racing. "How did she even know I was here tonight?" he demanded, his voice sharp and unyielding. Sophia's face crumpled as she whispered, "Because I told her." Those words shattered him. He froze, staring at his daughter, as though she had just struck him. "What did you just say?" he asked, his voice quiet but dangerously firm. "I didn't mean to," Sophia sobbed. "When you told me she was cheating, I confronted her. She said she only did it because she had proof you cheated on her first." Marcus's jaw clenched so tightly it ached. "And you believed her? Without even seeing this so-called proof?" He shook his head in utter disbelief. "You let her set me up. Baby, why? I asked you not to say anything. I trusted you." "I didn't know," Sophia cried. "I didn't know she'd do this. I swear, Dad, I didn't say anything about violence or anything like that. I didn't know she'd lie like this." Marcus closed his eyes and exhaled a trembling breath. For a moment, he was silent, the weight of the betrayal settling heavily on his chest. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "You have to leave now, Sophia." Her sobs grew louder as she clutched his arm. No, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Please don't do this." "You need to go," he repeated, his tone cold and final. "I can't be within 100 yards of you anymore. If I don't comply, she'll send the police after me. Do you understand? Leave. Now." Sophia broke down, wailing as she climbed out of the car. "I'll fix this, Daddy," she cried as she ran toward the office building. "I'll make it right. I promise." Marcus sat frozen, staring at the papers in his lap. His bank accounts frozen, his reputation smeared with baseless accusations, his daughter manipulated against him. Vanessa had orchestrated everything perfectly. He gritted his teeth and muttered bitterly, "Congratulations. You've destroyed me." Inside the office, Vanessa leaned against Andrew's desk, a self-satisfied grin on her face. "He can't come near the house. He can't access his money. For once, I have the upper hand." Andrew chuckled as he fastened his belt. "That's my girl. You've really nailed him to the wall." Before Vanessa could respond, the door burst open. Sophia stormed in, her face red with fury. "You're a monster," she shouted, her voice trembling with rage. Vanessa blinked in surprise, but her smug demeanor quickly returned. "Excuse me," she said, her tone icy. "Child abuse? Harassment? What is wrong with you?" Sophia screamed. "How could you stoop this low?" Vanessa shrugged, her voice calm and measured. "I did what I had to do. It's called strategy, Sophia. Your father deserves this for humiliating me." Sophia's hands balled into fists. "He didn't humiliate you. He didn't cheat on you, did he?" Vanessa laughed, brushing her hair back as she sauntered toward her daughter. "Why would he need to cheat? Have you seen him? He's a wreck. Meanwhile, I have Andrew. She gestured to the smug man leaning against the desk. If it upgrade? That was the breaking point. With a cry of rage, Sophia swung her fist and punched Vanessa square in the face. Vanessa stumbled backward, clutching her cheek in shock as Andrew burst out laughing. Nice shot, kid, he said, smirking. Sophia glared at him, her voice low and cold. You're an idiot. If I ever see you again, I'll make you regret it. She grabbed a nearby stack of files and swept them to the floor, glaring at both of them before storming out of the office. Back outside, Sophia found a grim determination fueling her actions. She gathered Vanessa's clothes, new dresses, lingerie, and designer shoes, and carried them to the front yard. With deliberate precision, she dumped the pile and poured lighter fluid over everything. Striking a match, she ignited the heap, watching the flames consume the fabric. When Vanessa pulled into the driveway minutes later, she jumped out of the car, screaming, "What the hell are you doing?" Sophia didn't even flinch. She sat in a lawn chair, roasting marshmallows over the fire. "What does it look like?" she said coolly. "You want to destroy Dad? Fine, but you're going to pay for it." Vanessa's face twisted in fury as she marched toward her. "You're out of your mind." "No, Mom," Sophia said, standing up and meeting her glare. "I'm finally seeing things clearly. You've manipulated me, lied to me, and hurt the only parent who ever cared about me. If you don't retract those ridiculous accusations against Dad, this fire is just the beginning." Vanessa faltered for a moment, but her voice regained its venom. "You touch me, and I'll report you too. Let's see how you like being accused." Sophia stepped closer, her voice low and menacing. "Go ahead, try it, but you'd better hope you're faster than me, because I won't just ruin your clothes next time." Sophia's hands trembled as she slammed the car door behind her, her mind swirling with fury and determination. She wasn't finished yet. Marching up to the office door, she replayed her mother's words in her head, each one more infuriating than the last. Vanessa had crossed the line, and Sophia was ready to confront her. Consequences be damned. Inside, Vanessa was still gloating to Andrew about her victory over Marcus when Sophia burst in. "Your boyfriend asked me to show him my underwear, Mom," she spat. Her voice dripped with venom as she added, "Don't worry. I'll be sure to deal with him after I'm done with you." Vanessa's smug grin faltered for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. "Sophia, you're being ridiculous," she said, rolling her eyes. "This drama ends now." "Oh, it's not ending," Sophia shot back. "It's just getting started." Vanessa turned to Andrew, her frustration bubbling over. "Damn it, Andrew, handle this." Before he could respond, Sophia raised her hand sharply. "Don't even try," she warned. "I'll deal with you when I'm ready." Turning back to her mother, she added, "You wanted to burn down Dad's life, but now it's your turn to watch everything go up in smoke." Vanessa opened her mouth to retort, but before she could, the sound of sirens pierced the air. She turned toward the window and saw a fire truck and a police car pulling up outside. "What the hell now?" she muttered, rushing to the door. Outside, a firefighter approached Sophia, who stood defiantly by the smoldering pile of clothes. "What's going on here, young lady?" the officer asked, his tone firm but calm. Sophia didn't hesitate. "My mom asked me to burn some of her old clothes," she said, her voice steady despite her seething anger. "Apparently, you can't have a fire in the front yard. Did you use anything to light it?" the firefighter asked, glancing at the still-smoking heap. "A whole can of lighter fluid," Sophia said proudly, folding her arms. "We don't have water, but there's sand in the barn. I can grab some if you'd like." The firefighter exchanged a look with the police officer, who turned back to Sophia. "Is your mother home?" he asked. "Yes, sir," she replied with mock politeness, gesturing toward the house. "She's right inside." Vanessa opened the door just as the officer rang the bell. "Ma'am, are you aware that it's against city ordinance to have an uncontrolled fire in your yard?" he said, holding up his citation pad. Vanessa's frustration spilled over. "No, I didn't know that," she snapped, her voice tight with barely contained anger. "Here's your fine," the officer said, handing her a ticket. "Just pay it. No court appearance is required. Next time, consider donating your unwanted clothes to Goodwill." Less fortunate people could use them. Vanessa slammed the door shut and leaned against it, seething. She clenched the ticket tightly in her hand and muttered under her breath, "This is all Marcus's fault." The following Monday, Vanessa's lawyer attended the restraining order hearing and chose not to renew it. Though they both knew it was based on lies, the restraining order had served its purpose, buying time to lock Marcus out of his life, tarnishing his reputation, and isolating him further. While Marcus's lawyer tried to press charges for perjury, the judge dismissed the claim due to insufficient evidence, leaving Marcus with little solace. Though the restraining order was lifted, the damage was done. Marcus spiraled into depression, crushed under the weight of false accusations, frozen bank accounts, and the betrayal of both his wife and daughter. Struggling to make ends meet, he took a leave from work and numbed his pain with alcohol. His parents urged him to see a therapist, but Marcus refused, convinced no one could fix the wreckage of his life. One afternoon, while Vanessa and Sophia were out, Marcus returned to their former home. The locks had been changed, but the garage door still opened. Inside, he found his belongings packed in boxes and garbage bags. Among the discarded items, he spotted their wedding album and family photos. He took them without hesitation, a bitter reminder of the life he had lost. Meanwhile, Vanessa's law firm escalated its attacks on Marcus, reporting the restraining order and fabricated allegations to his employer. The company, citing a moral clause in his contract, terminated him without hesitation. Though Marcus could have fought the decision, his broken state left him unable to act. Desperate for a fresh start, he packed his truck and moved to Chicago, leaving his ruined reputation behind. On the day of his departure, Sophia arrived at her grandparents' house, tears streaming down her face. "Dad, I'm so sorry," she sobbed, running to hug him. None of this should have happened. Marcus stood stiffly, his face hard. "You chose your mother without proof, and now you understand the consequences," he said coldly. "I filed first to catch her off guard, but it doesn't matter now." "Daddy, I didn't know," Sophia pleaded. "I'll fix this. I promise." Marcus shook his head. "Some accusations never go away. That child abuse lie? It'll follow me forever, no matter what. One day, your mother and her boyfriend will pay for what they've done, but I won't be here to see it." His voice cracked slightly as he added, "Goodbye, Jennifer. I loved you more than my own life." As his mother hugged Sophia tightly, Marcus climbed into his truck and drove away without looking back. Back in town, Vanessa celebrated her divorce by accepting Andrew's proposal. "Yes, Martin, oh yes," she cried, throwing her arms around him in the middle of the restaurant. Guests turned to stare as Vanessa beamed. "Let's go back to your house and celebrate," she suggested. Andrew, eager to please, paid the bill quickly. As they left, Vanessa caught sight of his ex-wife Carol dining with her parents. Carol, disgusted, spat at them as they walked by. Andrew simply laughed, unfazed by the venomous gesture. At the truck warehouse in Chicago, Marcus spotted his old colleague Lou by the entrance. "What's up, man?" Lou asked, eyeing Marcus with concern. "You look like someone ruined your favorite breakfast." Marcus sighed heavily. "Divorce is finalized today." Lou nodded grimly. "After what she put you through, man, you deserve some peace." "It's not her," Marcus admitted. "It's my daughter. She chose her side, and I just can't handle it. She calls and emails, but I can't bring myself to respond." Lou clapped him on the shoulder. "Give it time. She'll come around, and maybe so will you." Marcus said nothing, staring out at the horizon. The pain was still too raw, the scars too deep. Marcus sat at the table, swirling the thoughts of his shattered life as Lou's casual suggestion lingered in the air. "Maybe I should see a psychiatrist," Marcus said quietly, his voice edged with exhaustion. Lou nodded encouragingly. "Might not be a bad idea, my man. You've been through hell. Letting off some steam might help." A soft voice chimed in from behind them. "Or maybe, Marcus, you just need someone to remind you that life isn't always this cruel." He turned to see Marianne, one of the few colleagues who'd shown him kindness since his move to Chicago. Her eyes sparkled with warmth as she smiled. "Take a break from the darkness," she added softly, before walking away with the grace of someone who knew her power. Lou leaned in, his voice teasing. Now that's an idea. You need to get out there, Marcus. Start living again. Marcus let out a dry laugh, shaking his head. Who wants a washed-up guy like me? Lou smirked. Apparently Marianne does. Take a chance, man. Encouraged, Marcus decided to take the leap. Later that week, he mustered the courage to ask Marianne out. Their first date was simple but refreshing. Dinner, a movie, and dessert at Baker Square. Over coffee and cake, Marianne held his hand, her gentle presence a balm to his battered soul. You're a good man, Marcus, she told him. You've been through more than anyone deserves, but you'll get through it. You just have to believe that better days are coming. For the first time in months, Marcus felt a flicker of hope. He smiled and squeezed her hand. I'll try, and I promise I'll make this worth your while. Marianne leaned in, kissing him tenderly. As they walked out together, she whispered, Want to see my bedroom? Marcus hesitated. I'd love to, but... Marianne cut him off with a knowing smile. No buts. Come with me. She led him inside her home, where the cool glow of moonlight illuminated the room. They kissed deeply, slowly shedding the layers of their past hurts as they embraced. For the first time in a long while, Marcus felt alive. A week later, in a quiet suburb, a man dressed in black approached the back door of a lavish home. Smiling when he found it unlocked, he slipped inside with practiced stealth. Navigating the dimly lit house, he made his way to the home office, where he'd seen a photo of his target on Facebook, a smug man posing behind a polished desk. The man moved quickly, opening the closet behind the desk and slipping inside. He waited silently, gripping the weapon in his hand. His only concern was whether his target would notice the closet door opening, but his confidence in the plan was unwavering. Moments later, Andrew Langston entered the room. Oblivious to the danger, he sat at his desk, his back to the closet. The man emerged quietly, raising the weapon. The muffled shot ended Andrew's life in an instant. Carefully placing the weapon in Andrew's hand, he left a single note on the desk, price paid in full. When Vanessa returned home later that evening, she headed straight to the office, excited to share her new bedding purchase with Andrew. She froze at the sight of his lifeless body slumped in the chair. Letting out a blood-curdling scream, she rushed to call 911. Her eyes darted to the weapon in his hand and the note on the desk. Trembling, she read the chilling message. Her knees buckled as she gasped, No, Steve, what have you done? Detective Devontae Jordan arrived at the scene, quickly assessing the situation. Crime scene investigators were already combing through the office, but something about the scene felt off. A new set of golf clubs stood in the corner, incongruous with the grim surroundings. Nice clubs, he muttered absent-mindedly, before turning his attention to the body. The weapon was still in Andrew's hand, but there were no powder burns or marks that would typically accompany a self-inflicted shot. The detective frowned as he reviewed the note. Price paid in full, it read. He questioned Vanessa about the message's meaning, but her response only deepened his suspicions. It wasn't suicide, she insisted, her voice trembling. It was Steve. He hated Andrew for taking me away from him. Detective Jordan raised an eyebrow. That's a bold claim, Ms. Langston. Any proof? Vanessa leaned in, her voice low and conspiratorial. Andrew didn't even like guns. That weapon? It's not his. But Steve owns one just like it. The detective nodded, noting her comment as he considered other possible motives. Andrew's ex-wife and business rivals also came to mind, but Vanessa's conviction added a layer of intrigue to the case. The following Sunday, Detective Jordan paid Marcus a visit. He found him seated at his kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee. Mr. Vaughn, where were you Friday night? Marcus didn't flinch. Driving a rig from Madison to Chicago. You can check the tracker. I got to the warehouse at 9:30. The detective nodded. Andrew Langston was found dead in his office that night. Shot. His fiancée claims you had a motive. Marcus stared at him, unblinking. That man destroyed my life, but I didn't kill him. Detective Jordan studied Marcus for a moment before leaving. As he drove back to the precinct, his gut told him something wasn't adding up. The left-handed Andrew had been shot with his right hand, and the lack of gunpowder residue raised questions. This case, he thought, was far from over. At Andrew's funeral, Vanessa wept openly, drawing the ire of his ex-wife and daughters. Meanwhile, Sophia stood firm in her disdain. The alibi was solid, bolstered by timestamps and the store's cameras. Her insistence that Marcus was responsible rang hollow, especially since his alibi was airtight, verified by his truck's GPS tracker and corroborated by warehouse logs. Could it have been self-destruction? The commander had asked, but Jordan remained unconvinced. 6 months later, Angela invited her newest fling, Jason Davis, over for dinner. It was their third date, and Angela, ever persuasive, seduced him into her bed. The night was passionate, but after Jason left, Angela felt an odd sense of unease. She shrugged it off and went to sleep, unaware that Jason would never see morning. Jason sat in his kitchen, sipping a beer and checking his emails when a figure emerged from the shadows, a weapon raised. A single shot ended his life. The intruder placed the gun in Jason's hand and left the same chilling note. Price paid in full. Detective Jordan arrived at the scene, already bristling with suspicion. The similarities to Langston's case were undeniable. He scanned the room, noting the lack of forced entry. A technician approached him with preliminary findings. "Any prints?" Jordan asked. "Just the victims, as far as we can tell," the technician replied. "How'd they get in?" "No broken locks or windows," the officer explained. "The balcony door was unlocked. It wouldn't be hard for someone of average height to climb up and pull themselves onto the second floor." Jordan frowned. Average height for a man or a woman? An average man. A tall woman could probably manage it too. Jordan used gloved hands to check Jason's phone. The last call was to Angela Johnson. He let out a low whistle. She's involved again, he thought grimly. Later that day, Jordan questioned Angela. She greeted him with feigned composure, but her carefully curated facade didn't fool him. "Miss Johnson," he began, "why do your lovers keep dying?" Angela's eyes widened. "You're insinuating this has something to do with me? I wasn't anywhere near Jason last night. My alarm system was on all night, and the logs can confirm it." Jordan tilted his head. "You activated it when Jason left?" "Yes, and I didn't deactivate it until this morning," she said firmly. Jordan nodded, unconvinced. "You mentioned believing your ex-husband was behind these deaths. What makes you so certain?" Angela leaned forward, her voice dripping with venom. "Who else would want to punish me? Steve always resented Andrew and anyone else I dated." "And when was the last time you spoke to him?" "Not since the divorce was finalized," she replied sharply. "He hasn't contacted me, and I haven't reached out either." Jordan raised an eyebrow, taking note of her confidence. "For someone who hasn't heard from him in years, you seem awfully sure it's him." Angela's smile tightened. "Detective, I know how vindictive Steve can be." Jordan studied her for a moment longer before rising. "Thank you for your time. Please remain available for further questions." As he turned to leave, he paused. "By the way, how tall are you, Miss Johnson?" 5'10", she said coolly. "Interesting," Jordan muttered, walking out. Back at the station, Jordan briefed his boss on the latest developments. Same note as before. Identica Montag. Her alibi checks out, but something doesn't sit right. The commander sighed. "Keep digging, but don't waste resources chasing ghosts." "I won't," Jordan replied, though he knew he wouldn't let it go. 2 years passed. Angela shifted her approach to dating, becoming more cautious after repeated tragedies. She engaged in casual encounters but avoided anything serious until contracting an STD forced her to reconsider. Desperate for stability, she began dating Lance Forrest, a successful real estate developer. Their relationship became public after a month, despite whispers about Angela's questionable history. But those whispers turned into gasps when Lance was found dead in his home, shot during a ball game. As with the others, a weapon was placed in his hand, and the same note was left. Price paid in full. Detective Jordan was now certain. Someone was systematically eliminating Angela's lovers. Detective standing in from Schaumburg reached out to Jordan. "I've got a case that might connect to yours," he said over the phone. "Identical note. Similar circumstances." "The girlfriend?" "Angela Johnson." Jordan wasn't surprised. "Let's compare notes," he replied grimly. The puzzle was coming together, but the picture it painted was darker than anything Jordan had anticipated. The question wasn't just who was behind the killings. It was how far they were willing to go to ensure Angela Johnson's life unraveled piece by piece. Detective Jordan leaned back in his chair as he reviewed the new findings from Detective Anin. Angela Johnson was once again at the center of another suspicious death, this time involving her boyfriend, Lance Forrest. Despite airtight alibis in every case, the identical notes and the pattern of her lover's untimely deaths painted a grim picture. Jordan couldn't shake the feeling that someone was orchestrating these events, methodically dismantling Angela's life. Detective Anin confirmed Marcus's alibi once again, noting that GPS records placed him near Madison at the time of Lance's death. Angela's alibi appeared just as solid. She had ordered Chinese food and was seen on security footage receiving the delivery mere minutes before Lance was killed. A neighbor's emergency call placed the shooting squarely in the middle of her alibi window, making it impossible for her to have committed the crime. How does she keep getting tangled up in this, yet stay completely untouchable? Anin muttered during a call with Jordan. It's too clean, Jordan agreed. But until we can prove otherwise, these cases stay unsolved. 2 weeks later, Marcus and Marianne sat in the Great Hall, watching Sophia walk across the stage to receive her bachelor's degree. Marcus beamed with pride, the moment softening the hard lines that had etched themselves into his face over the years. He quickly wiped away a tear, hoping no one noticed. Marianne, seated beside him, squeezed his hand tightly and kissed it. After the ceremony, as they made their way to the car, Marianne broached a delicate topic. You know, she began gently, this might be a good time to call someone you love very much. Marcus's expression darkened. She chose her mother over me, he said flatly. She only came back when she felt guilty, not when it mattered. That betrayal ruined my life. Marianne frowned, but didn't press further. You've changed, she said softly. Were you this stubborn before the divorce? Marcus shook his head. No, he admitted, but I didn't have a reason to be. 5 years later, Angela and Sophia sat in the front row of a funeral home, surrounded by mourners who had come to pay their respects to Marcus. His battle with pancreatic cancer had ended just weeks after he walked Sophia down the aisle at her wedding, a moment she had fought hard to make happen. Despite years of estrangement, Marcus had finally reconciled with Sophia during his final months, thanks to Marianne's gentle persistence. At the wake, Sophia listened intently to Marcus's old friends and colleagues recount stories of his post-divorce life. Lou, his best friend, regaled her with tales of Marcus's humor and resilience, filling in the gaps she had missed during their estrangement. Marianne shared more personal memories, revealing how much Marcus had missed Sophia over the years. He kept clippings from the Herald about your work as a detective, she told Sophia, her voice thick with emotion. He called you his crime scene expert and said you inherited your love of investigation from all those Columbo reruns you watched together. Sophia smiled through her tears, feeling a sense of closure. She had finally seen her father at peace, content in the life he had rebuilt despite the scars left by betrayal. Angela, however, failed to share in the mournful reverence. At the after-service lunch, she made an ill-timed comment that shattered any chance of reconnecting with Sophia. Jenny, Angela said, her voice trembling with self-pity, I've finally found peace. Sophia's head snapped up in shock. What are you talking about, Mom? I've avoided relationships for years, Angela continued, ignoring her daughter's growing anger. I was always afraid your father would ruin them. Sophia's face twisted in fury. Are you serious? She hissed, her voice low and venomous. Dad was exonerated. You're the one who destroyed him. Angela tried to interject, but Sophia wasn't finished. You're happy now that he's gone? You worthless cow. I had hoped you'd changed, but now I hope you rot in hell. Angela winced, reaching out in an attempt to explain. Jenny, please let me. Don't, Sophia snapped, cutting her off. The next time I see you will be when we're putting you in the ground. Angela watched helplessly as Sophia stormed out. That final exchange marked the end of their already fractured relationship. Sophia returned to her life in law enforcement, carrying the weight of her father's legacy and the pain of her mother's choices. Meanwhile, Detective Jordan's investigation into the price paid in full killings remained at a standstill, the threads too tangled to unravel. As the years passed, Angela's life grew increasingly isolated, haunted by her past decisions and the relentless shadow of someone who sought to make her suffer, one piece at a time. The case files stayed open, gathering dust on Jordan's desk, a reminder of the unanswered questions and the lives left broken in their wake. 10 months after Marcus's passing, Angela Johnson sat at an upscale steakhouse with her boyfriend, Charlie Harlan. The candlelit ambience was warm and inviting, reflecting the glow of her renewed hope. Charlie reached across the table, taking her hand. "These last 8 months have been incredible, Angela," he said earnestly. "I didn't think I'd find someone like you at this stage of my life." Angela smiled, squeezing his hand. "I wasn't sure I'd ever feel this way again either. But I'm so glad we found each other." Taking a deep breath, Charlie pulled out a small velvet box and opened it, revealing a diamond ring. "Angela, I love you. Will you marry me?" Angela's heart raced. After a long pause, she smiled and nodded. "Yes," she whispered. As he slid the ring onto her finger, she couldn't help but think, he's gone. I have nothing to worry about anymore. A week later, Charlie sat on his back porch, savoring a Monte Cristo No. 2 cigar. The smoky aroma mixed with the crisp evening air as he thought about his upcoming wedding and Angela moving in with him. He exhaled a satisfied sigh, content with how life was unfolding. Suddenly, he felt cold steel pressed against his temple. Before he could react, the trigger was pulled. His lifeless body slumped forward, the cigar still smoldering in the ashtray. A weapon was placed in his hand, and under the ashtray, a familiar note read, "Price paid in full." Angela ended her call with Detective Jordan, her face streaked with tears. She shuffled to the bathroom, opened the medicine cabinet, and retrieved a bottle of sleeping pills. Angela had kept them just in case for years. With a heavy heart, she placed a letter in the mailbox, raised the red flag for outgoing mail, and returned to her bedroom. Lying on the bed, she clutched a photograph of herself and Steve from their wedding day. Memories of happier times flooded her mind. Family vacations, moments of pride at Jenny's achievements, and the love she once felt for the man who had become her greatest regret. "I hope you can forgive me," she whispered to no one in particular. Placing a note on her chest, Angela closed her eyes and drifted into a final, dreamless sleep. Jenny returned home that evening with groceries and mail in hand. She kicked off her shoes, poured herself a glass of Cabernet, and began sorting the mail. Her breath caught when she saw an envelope with her mother's handwriting. She tore it open, her eyes scanning the letter. The first page made her scream, the raw weight of her mother's words crashing down on her. Her mother's confession read, "My dearest Jenny, I offer you this final gift, my repentance. Whether you believe it or not, I love you with all my heart and am so deeply sorry for the pain I caused you and your father. Hurting both of you was the worst thing I've ever done, and I can never undo it. You were my light, Jenny, but I betrayed you, and I betrayed Steve. I destroyed what we had, and I accept my punishment for it. This will sound insane, but I did it. I ended the lives of these men. My lovers paid a price for taking me from your father, because, in my heart, I always belonged to him. I couldn't stop myself. I didn't know how. Please destroy this page." The second page contains my full confession for the police. I hope it brings closure. Please remember me for the good times, not as the monster I became. I love you, Jenny. I always will. Please forgive me, and may you have a happy, peaceful life with Blake. Never let temptation destroy what you've built, as it destroyed me. Love always. Mom. P.S. Seek help, Jenny. Don't let my madness shadow your life. Jenny burned the first page in the fireplace, ensuring it was completely incinerated. The second page, her mother's detailed confession, she folded carefully and placed in her purse. She sat in silence for a moment, her mind reeling, before calling Detective Jordan. "Detective Jordan? It's Jenny Stanger," she said, her voice unsteady. "My mother, Angela Johnson. She's dead." Jordan sighed. "I'm sorry to hear that, Jenny. I hope she's finally at peace. What can I do for you?" "I have something you'll want to see," Jenny replied. It's her confession. Jordan's voice sharpened. Confession? Of what? All of it, Jenny said. The murders. Every single one. The next morning, Jenny sat across from Detective Jordan, who read the letter in stunned silence. His brow furrowed as he processed the enormity of Angela's words. I suspected her, but this, he muttered, shaking his head. This is unbelievable. Jenny nodded. It makes sense now. Her alibis were always too perfect, but I never thought. I didn't want to believe it. She must have lost her sanity years ago. Jordan leaned back, the weight of the confession heavy in his hands. Why would she do this? Why date men just to kill them? Jenny looked down, her voice quiet. She couldn't let go of my father. She blamed them for taking her away from him. It's sick, but I guess in her mind, it made sense. Jordan exhaled sharply. Well, it's over now. For her. For you. For everyone involved. Jenny stood, thanked him, and turned to leave. Outside the station, she paused by her car, staring up at the sky. A small smile broke across her face as she whispered, "Thank you." She got into her car, drove home, and poured another glass of wine. For the first time in years, the shadow of her mother's sins felt lighter. The past was finally where it belonged, behind her,